This week, Pamela Gupta from Trusted.ai is with us to discuss Trustworthy AI and what that means. No news segment this week. Instead, we've got no less than 6 micro-interviews for you, all hosted by Bill Brenner and pre-recorded at this year's InfoSec World. The first is Getting Real with AI with Nathan Wensler, Chief Security Strategist at Tenable. The second is Consolidating Security Tools with Mike Camfield, CRO at Uptix. The third is InfoSec Burnout with Deidre Diamond, founder and CEO of CyberSN. The fourth is Weaponizing Asset Intelligence with Brian Contos, Chief Strategy Officer at Sevco Security. Next is AppSec with Kevin Johnson, CEO of Secure Ideas. And then finally, we are talking to Stacy Kuistra, COO at Dakota State University Applied Research Corporation, about creating more cyber warriors. All that on this episode of Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Cyber threats target digital identities. Do you know who or what is accessing your company's apps, systems, and data? You need to know who's there, who to let in, and who to keep out. And you'll need more than access management to stay secure. You need SailPoint Identity Security. As the leader in identity security, SailPoint can help mature your security resilience while driving efficiencies and compliance for your organization. Start your identity journey with SailPoint's free maturity assessment. Go to securityweekly.com/SailPoint to get your free identity security assessment today. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phish credentials are useless to attackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is, you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Collide. Visit securityweekly.com/Collide to watch a demo today. That's securityweekly.com/KOLIDE.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Gumbo Day. This is episode 335, recorded on Thursday, October 12th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Herald of Hacking, the Oracle of Offensive Security, Mr. Tyler Robinson. How you doing, Tyler?
Good to see you, Adrian. Miss your face, buddy.
Miss you too. It's been a while. Loving the support for Israel there. I work for an Israeli company, so that is very close to home right now.
I'm sure you're a little short on staff, aren't you?
Yeah. We had a couple coworkers in the reserves that got called up pretty quickly. So it's a lot. It's some of the folks are escaping into work, to take their mind off it, and not everybody can do that. So we're just being very patient with them over there, obviously, with all they have to deal with running in and out of the shelters and everything right now. So hopefully that resolves in a good way soon, but it doesn't seem like it's going to. It seems like that's going to go on for a long time.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Gumbo. It feels kind of silly to talk about National Gumbo Day with all this heavy stuff going on, but sometimes a nice warm bowl of gumbo can take your mind off of things. So it might be.
I thought you said Dumbo the first time.
No, gumbo.
Okay, gumbo. That makes a little more sense. I was trying to figure out in what world Dumbo had its own day, but hey, it's I guess a classic.
It probably does. I look at these every week, these websites that have all the national and international days that marketing teams make up, and some of them are pretty funny. Some of them are very serious. I try and go for things that are a little more frivolous, a little more fun. There's definitely some serious stuff. Like today is also World Vision Day, and today is also National Arthritis Day, I think. And Yeah, one of my kids actually has early onset rheumatoid arthritis, and has to get shots every couple of months for that. So that's some more serious stuff there, and but gumbo, I'm gonna try and keep my mind on that. Good bowl of gumbo can
Now
wash
it's just
away
make me hungry. It's about lunchtime.
lot of badness, at least for a short period of time. So we get a quick announcement to hear, and then we will interview our guest, or introduce our guest, and get into the interview. Security Weekly listeners, we are celebrating the milestone of reaching over 1,000 members of our CISO community. The Cybersecurity Collaboration Forum is a one-stop shop for executive collaboration comprised of CISOs across various industries. A part of this growing community of CISOs, join us as a member or technology partner. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity collaboration. All right, and today's topic is Trustworthy AI. We're excited to have Pamela Gupta, CEO at Trusted AI, with us today. Pamela is an expert on digital trust, cybersecurity, and AI governance, and has 25 years of experience building cybersecurity programs at Fortune 50 companies. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Adrian.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you had me on your podcast a few weeks ago. You've got your own podcast, which I think is also called Trustworthy AI. Is that correct?
That's right. So, Trustworthy AI, de-risk business adoption of AI. In other words, how can you identify and anticipate risks so that as you go on your AI journey, it streamlines it, makes it more efficient and more trustworthy.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about what that means to de-risk it and get into a lot of the details of how we can make AI more trustworthy and some of the issues of trust that we have with it, because trust is definitely deeply attached to it. And I think it's important to point out that you've been doing this long before ChatGPT made it the topic that everybody was talking about. And the heart of almost every new startup, regardless of what industry the startup is in. I don't care if you're making, if you've got webcams products on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, or it's a B2B enterprise cybersecurity company. Everybody is now talking about it. So you've been doing. How long have you been doing Trustworthy AI?
So I'll give you a pretext of my journey has been in the career world, in the professional world, has been creating strategic risk-based security programs, holistic programs. And about 4 years ago, to answer your question, I started taking a look at what is involved in creating security in AI systems, making sure that they are secure and reliable. And I saw there was a lot of rhetoric and published data on how to use AI systems for security, but not that much about how do we instill security into these systems in a holistic fashion. So that started my kind of analysis of what do we need to make these systems secure. And it was a surprise to me. And even after 25 years of, wading deep into security waters, I realized security is not going to be enough to secure AI. And that's why I started taking a look at what else do we need, and taking a look at, what EU had out there in terms of their high-level, expert groups in AI, OECD, and kind of charted out a approach called Trustworthy AI. So that's about 4 years ago. Short answer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and so I imagine your world and your focus changed a bit when generative AI, like it was one thing when we had the generative images, but when it started generating text, I think that penetrated a lot more deeply into a lot more industries.
One thing that I just want to kind of throw a definition out there as to what is AI, right? And why is it so important to know the difference between a traditional software system and how AI behaves? Any AI, whether it is predictive AI or generative AI, is trained on curated data sets or lots of data, voluminous data. And the thing that sets it apart is that it has emergent rules and behaviors that these AI systems will develop without our intervention, right? So based on the data we're feeding it, it's going to come out with rules and recognize, for example, do facial recognition, for example, an example of pattern recognition, making decisions. And that is the predictive AI. Now, how is generative AI different from predictive AI? Is from all these years, we've really been using AI for making decisions or helping make decisions. But the difference is generative AI is actually has the capability to create content, right? So even if we take a deep fake, for example, in predictive AI, we can do facial recognition. In creating content on generative AI, we can create deep fakes, for example. We can create a face, which is very much alike to a, the image that you feed it, or video, or even audio, for example. So I just wanted to make that differentiation between what historically has been software and systems, then AI, predictive AI, and what we were using it for was predictions and using these emergent rules and behaviors for helping us make really efficient and speedier at scale decisions, to now where what we're seeing with generative AI and LLMs is creating content, multimodal content.
How do we get to a point where we begin to build this trust ecosystem around AI? When we're talking about generative, and traditionally we've been very narrow focused with AI around very specific training models and data sets. And now where we're getting this generative and we're getting this mass influx of training data and models that we're leveraging to train this, how do we begin to do that in a trustworthy manner where we're not ending up with tainted models, tainted data, as well as the bias that tends to come out of that, because the data that is being pushed in has bias by default. And so how do we begin to leverage this so that we can actually begin to trust some of the output, and we don't see all of the bias that's happening, and we don't see some of the problems that are coming from these very, very large data set models and training models that are exponentially getting larger and larger and being fed input that may be malicious, may not be malicious, may just be incorrect. So how do we get to that trust point?
That's a great question, right? What sets it apart, and how can we? Firstly, let me answer the question of, and take it from the approach of, can we even do anything right now, right? We have foundational models which have been trained on the internet, right? On mixed data that may be very valid data, may be very mixed, depending on the origin and the lineage of the data. It could be trustworthy, it may not be trustworthy. So we have these foundational models already. If we are going to use them for the usage, let's say, actually is extremely important. What we use it for will determine how much trust is required and what can we do if it is not that trustworthy, the system, right? I think it's a good time to actually talk about what is trustworthy. And if that's good, we can talk about that, or we can come back to define what is a trustworthy.
I would love to know what you think is trustworthy right now. That's great. That's a great starting point.
Okay. So when we're talking about trust, NIST came out with an AI RMF, an AI risk management system, to do a couple of things. And there are three disparate elements of that RMF, all right? But let me just focus on what they are using to kind of instill, at least a standardized definition of trustworthiness, because that varies depending on who you ask, all right? So let's just go with the NIST definition. The way they define it is that these systems should have characteristics of trustworthiness, to more to your point, Tyler. And these are, now brace yourself, all right? So they should be valid and reliable, safe, secure and resilient, accountable and transparent, explainable and interpretable, privacy enhanced, and fair, meaning they should not have bias or they should have harmful bias that is managed. Okay. Now, why do I say brace yourself? These are these areas, each one of them, as you know, from the field of cybersecurity and the fields that we come from. These are all areas which can have a lot of complexity, even in a predictable software system. But when you are talking about systems that are training on data and learning on data, and therefore not at any given point are a snapshot of what in time of what data has been fed into them, and that is continually changing. You can see how all of these can become, also a point in that whole spectrum, a point in the spectrum of how secure and resilient are they. I'm going to I'll tell you a little bit about some of the attacks and the threat models that we can kind of relate to the cybersecurity world, that the CISOs can find it useful. But these are very difficult and complex areas. Okay, so now having defined what is a trustworthiness characteristic of an AI system, when we talk about something such as accountable and transparent, that LLM, that generative AI, is kind of failing that particular element, doesn't it? Meaning, it's not the foundational model. You don't have that much transparency into what all is the data that is these systems are built on. Okay, so let's even keep that aside and say, let's say the foundation model is now trained and now you can fine tune it. But one thing we do have to understand that there are how to make it trustworthy. When these ChatGPT, let's take that for example, it's an LLM, large language model, trained on lots corpus amount of data, right? And there was human in the loop, right? They were giving it input and humans were rating it. But we have to know what is the how do you draw expectation? What is your baseline of expectation? The people who were doing the analysis and saying, okay, yes, this prompt is right, this response is right, they were not highly trained individuals. So if you take that and a system such as ChatGPT and deploy it in a high-risk area where it is interfacing with human beings. So, for example, the eating disorder chatbot that we saw, what happened with it, right? Are you familiar with that that particular incident?
A little bit.
So it's called Tessa, and it was created by the the organization that deals with eating disorders. For I don't know the exact name of the organization right now; it's not coming to me. But they had a chatbot that was existing. It had rules-based development around chatbot. That was if you get asked this question, this is what you respond with, and that was what it was working for the longest time, right? I think they had it for at least a couple of years. Interact with humans calling in, people calling in with eating disorders, and it was giving advice on how to cope or whatever, right? Whatever the question may be. Fairly contained, all right? Now, eating disorders is one of the biggest problems in mental health in this country, and it typically it has to do around self-image, and it people already have an eating disorder, means they are either not eating right or they are really scared to eat because of the effect it can have on their the body weight, etc. Few months ago, when they integrated a LLM kind of approach, they made it, they rolled out the system, and they found out that it was actually giving advice about going on a diet or watching your calories, which is just the opposite of what you want to be giving as advice. So in this case, rolling out a system where it's not trustworthy because of the use that you're putting it in, right? It is, firstly, you don't know what it's going to come up with, right? It's going to put two and two together and give you a different answer each time. In other words, that's highly problematic and not a good business decision, right? So in this case, they had to pull it off, and I'm not sure what damage was done, but it was not a good choice.
But now, isn't that the case for a large number of use cases that AI is being used in, or we'll call it machine learning models? The places that this is getting used in have high volatility, high risk for abuse, and yet we are still moving forward with these because a lot of the push is or training with the testing and the trust coming from data scientists, right? We have a lot of really smart people doing this. Oh, take that back. We don't have a lot of them. We have a small number of very smart people doing a lot of this work, but those are data scientists. They don't fully think through all of the sociological, all of the even adversarial. We haven't even talked about, okay, we're deploying these models in different places, and most people don't think about the ways in which hackers abuse things, and yet they're going to get abused because that is the nature of the world, and there are evil people out there doing this consistently, and there will always be evil people doing those things. So how do we get to the point where we have the ability to leverage things like large language models and deploy those in scenarios that are probably going to be hostile, because anything that touches the internet is going to be hostile, and do that in a way that is going to generate things that are useful to humanity without having explicit trust from the general public, which doesn't understand the data science, doesn't understand the risk, and doesn't understand the output and how to delineate. This is just like the news and choosing appropriate sources from your news and understanding, network bias and news bias and reporting bias and all the backgrounds of that. Like, how do we not let that same kind of fate happen to AI and something that could be very useful while still maintaining the trust and getting this into useful technology in a meaningful time frame?
So I'm going to reiterate the point I made earlier again. There is the predictive AI, which is extremely useful, and it has been what we have been using for up till generative AI kind of made its, it came explosively on the screen, I would say, or on the scene. So there's a different kind of trust and risk that goes with predictive AI. When it comes to generative AI and the example that we are, just to follow through on this, there are instances where we are seeing a more calculated risk and a measured approach to rolling these out. So if you deploy it in scenarios which are thought through for low impact, for example, low risk, low impact, then this does have the potential to really help make your business or organization be extremely efficient and effective. So I'll give you one example of where I've seen this done publicly. San Jose, they rolled it out, generative AI. They had policies around it. They put their own guardrails, which is very important. They put their own guardrails depending on the use case that they are rolling it out for. And they're allowing it to be used in scenarios. For example, of when, in a city you have non-emergency services such as 311. So if you have emergency, you call 911. If you have a question You call 311, for example. Some cities have that. I know New York has that as well. In San Jose, they're using it for the 311, where a service where there is transparency. When people are calling in, they are aware that they're interacting with with humans who or systems, regardless, but they may be leveraging generative AI, so they're aware of that. Plus, they're giving them advice and responses for non-emergency purposes. Now, I'm not saying that that is the only, useful use case. There can be others, but it's going to vary by each company and what they're using it for. Another really good one that I really like is Coca-Cola's marketing campaign. They are using their own content, the content through what exists in their galleries, through the different campaigns, etc. So their own data for generating generative GenAI marketing campaigns. So it really does depend on as recognizing where we are with the trustworthiness of the systems today, and for how to use it for to lower the negative impact and increase the benefit, right?
How do companies get to that point in today's market? If you're not leveraging AI in your platform, your SaaS, your product, whatever, you're behind the curve for your competitors. However, everybody's jumping headlong into this AI venture because they want to maintain, the persistence with their peers. But at the same time, everyone's doing this really horribly, and if you don't do it, then you're also doing it horribly because you're not doing it. So how do we as a society get to the point where we're having these intelligent conversations? Who do we go to have these conversations? How do you bring people like data scientists or offensive AI researchers in to evaluate how and what you're going to do prior to doing it, or you've already deployed it? What are your next steps so that you can make better or more educated decisions at the executive level for your path down the AI and ML journey, given that you may already be in a position that you're doing that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know your own business, right? Your own organization, and have that conversation around governance, around expanding that role, because this is not something CISOs can do, right? This is really important to highlight. This, firstly, I'm finding, and I won't go into that actually, but this is not something a particular group in a company can solve for. Okay, so as with anything else, right, in order to really get the value of AI, whether it is predictive or generative, it really does start at the top, right? We hear that for so many things, but when it comes to something that can be a competitive edge, or as you mentioned, the difference between, do you stay in business and maintain status quo, and perhaps not have a business? As you can see, the multiple reports on that. Accenture has published reports on, if you don't adopt AI, you risk losing your business altogether in a few years, because to those who have adopted it successfully. But what you will also see are statistics of, this is a complex area, and you have to take the right approach, meaning guided and a risk-based approach. Because if you don't, the value that you will get from it may be a percentage of what you would be getting if you did this the right way. So statistics that I'm seeing out there from McKinsey's and the Accentures, they're the companies that have adopted and are leaders because of adoption of AI. And what's setting them apart is the ones that have taken a holistic, risk-based approach as to knowing exactly what their objectives are, who to involve, right, and creating cross-functional governance teams, which means governance is not a four-letter word, right? It's not something that you do after, or something that is invoked at periodically, but operationalizing governance. And for that, you need cross-functional teams, such as, at the very minimum, you need the management team, the business teams. You need legal, privacy, security. I had actually created a model for this called AI Tips, and it stands for transparency, integrity as in data, integrity as in algorithms or system, privacy and security. But I'm not saying that's the only model, right? There's so many approaches one can take to create that center of excellence within a company. Because the reality is, you want to get the value, but there may not be only one area that you want to strive to get value for, right? So there will be either multiple AI systems or AI models or whatever the business is. For example, you could have hundreds or thousands, right? So each one, really scale and to derive the value, not only with existing KPIs, right, but to be able to fully leverage the value of AI. We're seeing companies that are doing it in a systematic approach. Um, they're they're defining new KPIs that are not possible with the existing ways and methods of operating. So there is immense value, but to answer your question, how do you achieve that? That is through the top-down approach of who needs to be involved. How do we take a look at what is the value for the business? Is this even something that can be solved by AI, or do we, maintain analytics for example? Are we introducing more risk if we bring in AI or generative AI? So that is very much a cross-functional and a center of excellence, the way I see it.
So building on that, you say it needs to come top down. That this needs to come from leadership. Are you seeing organizations creating roles for this, like a chief privacy officer, chief risk, chief trust officer, and is that where it should be owned? Well, I know it's going to vary based on the how the company is constructed, what kind of company it is. A financial institution is going to be very different from a product-based company, right? But so I guess kind of a twofold question: who do you generally see owning this? And are they that high enough up in the company where they can get some results and make an impact? And who should be owning it?
I will give you one example that I've seen is just phenomenally done right, and that's ADP. I have no connection to them now, so I can, there's no harm in, they have an approach where it's a cross-functional team, and so there's a steering committee, or I call it a center of excellence. That's what we help people do, companies do, is create a center of excellence, which goes across. It's a steering committee. It goes across different teams. Okay. But the way ADP has done it, and I love the way they have approached it, which is it's governance, it's in data and data security and data privacy, and the risk team, right? With the data team. So data team does not own. What I am seeing out there is chief data officers, whether it's to one or a two-person team or a really large team, that often are being kind of expected to have this kind of holistic approach, or being asked or to deliver on things such as transparency, for example, whereas that's not responsibility set on the right shoulders, because they don't have that. To your point, they don't have that authority to really drive the business, right? We've seen this in cybersecurity world, for example. You're a CISO, you can't drive what the business does, right? You have to be very aligned with the business objectives. So it's, where does it fall? I really think it is a cross-functional enterprise, and depends on the size of the organization. but definitely does need the authority to drive the push and get the right kind of input and participation that cannot come from a single team. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ultimately, somebody's got to own it, though. The buck has got to stop with somebody, and I would imagine, maybe it would be somebody in privacy or trust, again, depending on the organization, somebody like, I think Twitter used to have like a chief trust officer, and sometimes we see like in social network companies, even security teams tend to roll up to that trust role or to a privacy role or something like that, which is maybe part of the legal organization. But sounds from how you describe it, it sounds like even the frameworks here. We haven't really talked about the NIST risk management framework that they have out for AI. Looks and feels very similar to frameworks for data privacy, for risk and privacy. When it dealing with data, and ultimately, a lot of the risk here does have to do with data. I mean, the example you gave earlier about the eating disorder chatbot, that's a very different risk, but for enterprise use, if this is going to have access to their own data, I do see a lot of parallels to data privacy. So how similar is it to, and how close should those two components be, managing data privacy and risk and AI privacy and risk?
That is just, one component of it, right? So we have not seen anything of this magnitude before when it comes to complexity and the trustworthiness elements that I was asking you to brace yourself for, right? That data and privacy and safety, these are security, transparency, right? Explainability. For example, that can be extremely important in healthcare. If your healthcare automated system, automated or intelligence augmentation system, hopefully it's IA, right, is going to give advice, you want to be able to trust, be able to figure out how it's coming to that conclusion, right? To explain, for example, these are not things that belong under a privacy group, for example, right? So where does it belong? It really does belong under a chief risk officer or a chief trust officer, somebody who goes across different groups, but has the authority to kind of get the results that they need. Going back to that, that NIST. Let's take a look at the NIST AI RMF, for example. It has at the heart of it, it has the governance piece. And what it does drive is, there's map, measure, and manage, okay, risks. So depending on the context, you then identify what are the risks, okay? Then you have the measure and function, and then you have the box that they have for monitor and kind of, in a very continuous fashion, okay? And the idea is that that should apply. Now, we're talking about operationalizing governance, okay? That should apply to every part of the AI life cycle. Whether you're deploying AI or whether you're creating or designing your own product, or you are implementing, for example, or even for third parties, right, of how they are using your for mission critical or really important functions. What this RMF is, the intention of the RMF, the risk management framework, is to drive those trustworthy elements across each and every part of that life cycle. And I'll tell you what that life cycle includes. In that risk management framework of govern, and like I said, very, very contextual, taking a look at, for example, when we talk about this chatbot, this Tessa application, what is the use case, going to be very different if they were deploying it for something else, right, within the same organization even. So it's very contextual, and it's extremely broad, right? To your point and to your question earlier, it's extremely broad. So it really does not belong under the security group or the privacy group or the legal group, because we are talking about things such as fairness. You were talking about security. Security, we haven't even talked about how complex the security task is when it comes
Right.
to securing the system, because it can come from data poisoning, but it can also come from when the when the models are being developed, when they are being deployed, and then just to go down that security point more, right, in more detail. It's not even things that we have originally been concerned with. So, for example, we, as security officers, you never had to look at the data lineage, right, or data bias. So, where does it
Right.
belong? It doesn't. I was talking to a CISO, and he says, "I don't care about where the data is coming from. I'm concerned about the systems and confidentiality." So you see, it's really not a. This is a special um, group that has the ability to holistically look at, for my organization, if you have that center of excellence or you have a cross-functional team, who does it ultimately report to? Chief trust officer, chief risk officer. That would be the right place. And then who are the constituents of that will depend on what is it that you're trying to do. Now, even for something like generative AI, right? You can put a process around it. For example, if there is I'd created an acceptable use policy for a company, right, that had no idea, I shouldn't say no idea, but they had no context of where all it could be used in their company. So in that case, what do we rely on? What do we know that has worked, right? That's going to be that people, process, technology. Who's using it? For what purpose? What technology, in this case, is generative AI? Who's using it? Whoever is using it has to know these principles. But then the process piece, right? If there is a process or around how is it ultimately being used, for example, what are the gated criteria for that? Is it customer facing? If it's customer facing, then what are the filters we need to have? What are the controls we need to have in place in order to make sure that it is customer ready? Now, will that slow things down a little bit and take away that very objective, of where we're trying to get speed? Yes, but in this case, it's not going to at least derail your whole project, and you can maybe still get a lot more functionality and speed within that group than you were able to without it.
Yeah, so just coming back again, your comment about the CISO saying, "Look, data lineage and integrity is not my issue here. It's protecting systems." It's one of the concerns occurring to me here is that if nobody owns this, if it doesn't roll up to a particular person in the org, maybe that position has to be created. Maybe it's a new group that's created, or maybe it's kind of like a hybrid group of existing people and existing organizations in the company. But I worry that if nobody's looking at at the problem holistically,
Yeah.
maybe they bring in, they hire you to come in to tell them about some of the risks to help guide them, give them a framework. But I worry about finger pointing about, hey, that wasn't my problem. When the inevitable privacy data leaks, whatever happens with it, misuse, abuse of their product.
Right.
Are you getting that same sense that maybe in a lot of these organizations nobody does own it, and that in itself is a big risk?
Um, I don't know how much I can share, because this is live and I won't go into it into any detail. But what I am seeing is a bit concerning because I'm seeing, for example, we're already using and deploying these systems, and yet on the other hand, we have not even caught up to what the risks are. Forget about even a concerted effort to address them, right? Some of them we are still talking about this is what we need to do. We need to have these processes in place, or this is this framework, or well, the frameworks also are being created on the as we are speaking, right? But we are playing with fire to a degree because there is no ownership, there is no accountability, and even if there is, it is across different groups. One good way of looking at it is the data organization, the CDOs, for example. They are aware of what models they're building, what systems they're building, and if they are getting pulled into um, a meeting, or that can be very much be a part of starting point for defining the guardrails that need to go in, and that can be literally be under uh, either a new role. If it's a new role, who does that role report to? Because the most effective one really is to have that chief risk officer or the CFO, um,
Right.
somebody who has a lot of uh, authority in the organization. That is definitely a one possibility, but cross multi-stakeholder is extremely necessary. That's one thing. Okay. The other is to answer your question about what are some of the current trends, right? The current trends and the current pulse. If I take a look at take a reading on that pulse, we're talking about, I don't know how to say this, because it's not a good thing. What I'm not seeing is that even if it is security, somebody in the security group, like the CISO, for example, having a real clarity as to what can go wrong. They are focused more on things such as data poisoning, but that's really one part of the puzzle, okay, one part of the threat vector. When you talk about something like generative AI, now what we saw going wrong, right? It's not completely under the CISOs, or if you track the data or lineage, or know where the data is coming from. Even for a generative AI, OWASP top 10 for LLMs was produced, right? But when I'm talking to CISOs, most of them are not even aware of that or adopting. So I think even if we don't have a cross-functional, holistic approach for your own areas, let's say for ethics, for privacy, for safety, even if people were creating excellence around the areas that they are managing, it would be so much easier for the organization to kind of piece together what the risks are. But right now, it's not even at the point of finger pointing. I think there's a lot of gaps in recognizing what the real risks are.
Yeah. Yeah, and everything is moving so fast, though. I think that's part of the problem here, and it's organizations. Well, I would think we're a little better at moving fast after the pandemic, but this is kind of moving fast in a different way. Shifting how roles and responsibilities and how you do business. It's just it's impacting so many different systems in so many different ways, almost overnight. So it's almost hard to blame organizations, but if they want to profit off it and move that fast, they're going to have to figure out the guardrails and the controls. But yeah, that's all we have time for today, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. I think we accomplished our goal, and I think this podcast is going to give folks a lot to think about. In terms of how to implement AI within their, and how to handle it within their company. Anything you want to wrap up with?
I would just say that, when we're talking about a holistic approach, it does include regulations as well, but don't wait for regulations. You are aware of what the risks are for your company and what your objectives are. And and also the promise of AI, right? There are companies that have leveraged AI for achieving things that were not even possible with their existing KPIs. One can do that, right? There is so much that we can gain that we could not before. It's all possible, but we really need to take a look at it very holistically when it comes to risks and value. So I'll just conclude on that.
Thank you so much, Pamela, again. And stay tuned when we come back. We've got those 6 pre-recorded micro interviews for you that are hosted by Bill Brenner. And also thanks to Tyler for joining me today.
Much love, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions. And again, no news segment this week. Just going to have those 6 pre-recorded micro interviews. Our format will be back to normal next week with 2 interviews and a new segment. So come back and see us then.